Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for being with me and the Attorney General, James Huthmeyer, today. I can tell you that I've had the honor of working with the General back when he was the Chief of Staff for Governor DeSantis and now as the Attorney General. And he is the man. He understands the rule of law. He understands the need to keep the community safe. He and his team are just absolutely, totally outstanding. General, thank you for being here today and agreeing to do this press release with us. We're going to have speakers today. Of course, the General is going to speak as soon as I give a quick overview. And then Brad McVeigh, the statewide prosecutor. After that will be Vaden Pollard. He's the Deputy Commissioner for FDLE. And there'll be Rob Mateo, who is a retired detective from the Sheriff's Office, and he's currently the president of the Florida Gang Association. And then there's Christy Dolan from Department of Corrections. But let me talk about Hernando Thompson. He's 40 years of age. His nickname is T-Murda. Does that tell you anything? He is the head of the sex, money, murder gang for the state of Florida. So we did a wiretap. We called it Catch and Stain. Now stain is rank. And our goal was to take down the sex, money, murder hierarchy. And that's what we all did together. Statewide prosecutor, FDLE, the Sheriff's Office worked together, and we did this wiretap. This is the man at the top of the pyramid. Now, this T3, as we call it, or wire intercept, allowed us to seize 4,787 communications that talked about criminal conduct. In addition to that, we served 6 search warrants. We seized $1.5 million in drugs. We seized 18 firearms. We seized ballistic armor. We had one event where the suspects received permission up the chain of command to commit a murder and were after our victim to murder him. The only reason he was not murdered was because the victim got away from them during the middle of the night. And by the way, we found the murder to be victim the next day or a couple of days later and locked him up on some charges we had in order to keep him alive until this investigation could be completed. So we ended up arresting a suspect who was to be the victim of a murder. It was ordered by T-Murda's team. If it weren't for the hard work of the statewide prosecutor's office and our awesome Attorney General at the time who worked with us, and now our current Attorney General, this wouldn't be possible. But you know, you see the rolling stuff on him. But look, I just want you to get a picture of his criminal record. This is a bad man, and he needs to go to prison for a long time. And I'll stop there because I don't want to get in the way of the Attorney General and our team that's going to give you the details of the magnificent work that occurred. General?
Thank you. It's great to be here with America's Sheriff. I got to tell you, I continue to be perplexed when I see ongoing criminal activity in this jurisdiction. You'd think by now people know what they're looking at if they come here. If you want to engage in dangerous, violent, gang-related activity, do not do it in Florida. We're going to take you down. But most importantly, do not do it in Polk County. I mean, are you nuts? So this is a great way to start the year. You have a notorious gang leader here who ran a large-scale operation, 12 other individuals arrested in this case, and he was directing everything from robbery to drive-by shootings, To, some of his people were pointing guns at children where they were extorting and making threats and ultimately trying to get their way. We're not going to tolerate that here in Florida. He's looking at 5 lifetime sentences. Our prosecutors in court will be pushing to ensure that he does not have an opportunity to ever be released again. We want him behind bars for the rest of his life. We want to send a message. If you engage in this type of violence, if you run drugs and guns and violent behavior into communities, you are going to pay the price. We're going to put everybody on notice. If you engage in this type of violent behavior, you are going to pay the price. You are going to be behind bars for the rest of your life. We are going to protect our families at all costs. The affidavit in this case with the charging documents was over 250 pages, over 17 counts included. The short of it is this was a bad dude, a violent guy, and we're going to do what needs to be done to protect our community at all costs. So I thank law enforcement. He got away with a lot till he ran into the sheriff's office here. I looked at the press conference the sheriff did a couple years ago. When the arrests were made, he said, I don't want to see this guy breathe another free breath of fresh air again. Well, Sheriff, he's going to have at least one on the bus going from the jail to the prison, but rest assured, he will not be breathing fresh air outside of a Department of Corrections facility. I want to thank the investigators for working on this and the prosecutors. Prosecutors go toe-to-toe with some of the most dangerous people, and ultimately they're often the last faces that these violent offenders see before they go away. That's why I proposed at the legislature this year that our prosecutors get the special risk retirement benefits. That's early and more retirement. These are not the highest paying jobs in the world. They're tough jobs, but they are the last line of defense between us and dangerous people that want to hurt our families and the way of life that we've built here in the free state of Florida. So we rounded out my first year, 2025, we rounded out with a bang. It was a record year for the office. We participated in over 1,300 child predator arrests. I think a few hundred of those came right here with Sheriff Judd. We secured almost 400 criminal convictions with sentences up to over 1,700 years. So it was a big first year out of the gate, but we're only going to get even tougher on crime. And it's no secret why Florida has record crime lows, over 50-year crime lows, and they continue to get lower because in Florida we've figured it out. We support law enforcement with everything we've got. We give them the tools to be successful. And then when they bring in the bad guys, we bring the heat, we lay down the law, and we put them away for as long as possible. We don't believe in early release, not in this state. So thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here. Support the sheriff's office, and we'll keep doing everything we can to keep this state safe. All right, thanks. Pull this out of the way.
Yep. All right, thank you, General. I want to start off by thanking our law enforcement partners, Sheriff Judd and his team, the Department of Corrections, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, for their tremendous investigative work in this case, as well as our prosecutors who delivered a terrific presentation and case and were able to attain a much-needed conviction. Gang prosecutions are not easy. They take coordinated effort between law enforcement and prosecution. It takes great diligence, great patience, and the higher up you go in the hierarchy, the more difficult it becomes. Defendants will oftentimes attempt to insulate themselves, which is exactly what happened here. This defendant orchestrated and directed a criminal operation that terrorized Floridians, robberies, home invasion, burglaries, drug dealing, and this defendant, as the General State, is now facing 5 potential life sentences. The state of Florida and this community are safer for this prosecution. When the Attorney General and the Sheriff say criminals should pack it up and find another state to operate in, this isn't a talking point. They're dead serious. The Office of Statewide Prosecution is tracking the Attorney General's priorities, protecting children, rooting out gangs, taking out drug, human, and sex traffickers. This prosecution of a high-level gang member reflects those priorities. So if you are a gang member, a sex predator, drug trafficker, and you happen to be listening to this press conference, unless you want to spend the rest of your life in a cage, I strongly encourage you to listen to the Attorney General and the Sheriff and relocate your operations from Florida. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Attorney General, Sheriff Judd. It's an honor to be here today in Polk County Sheriff's Office. I'm Deputy Commissioner Vaden Pollard with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement. I have the opportunity to oversee investigations for FDLE throughout the state. I'll submit to you that our relationship in working with the Attorney General and with Sheriff Judd is phenomenal. Nobody gets after it like they do. They are hard chargers. And the special agents that worked on this case with the Polk County Sheriff's detectives, they get after it every day. When you think about the name of this gang and what their ethos is, for lack of better terms, they are right where they belong. You know, justice requires finality, and it's coming with this. And thank you, Attorney General, that your shop is going to make sure that these guys stay away for a long time. Thank you.
Good morning. So they've touched on the investigative side of this. I want to talk about the collaborative side of this. This was a long and complex investigation. We put together a really good team for this investigation, Lieutenant Gonzalez, Special Agent Watley, myself. Collaboration starts at training, believe it or not. You get to meet a lot of great folks at conferences like the one the Florida Gang Investigators Association puts on, and that collaboration and that networking carries away from the conference and finds itself at work, and it makes it easier for us during these investigations to find folks that we need to fill in the gaps of information that we find during these investigations. One great example of that is Ms. Dolan. She'll be up here in just a moment. She and I worked quite a bit during this investigation to fill in a lot of those gaps, especially when we start talking about coded communications. So my appreciation goes out to the sheriff for letting us do this investigation. It was long and complex. The Attorney General's Office of Statewide Prosecution, Gary Malik, was our prosecutor that took us to the finish line. I appreciate them all very much. Thank you.
Good morning. Christy Dolan, Florida Department of Corrections. I'd just like to emphasize the critical role of interagency collaboration. This case is a perfect example of how cooperation across different levels of law enforcement is not just beneficial, but it's essential for effectively developing complex and multi-jurisdictional investigations. Our agencies work seamlessly together, combining resources, expertise to provide vital support and critical intelligence to the investigation. The strong relationships that we forged together allowed for the rapid and effective exchange of information, which was instrumental in the progression of the case and our overall mission success. FDC remains dedicated to supporting all of our law enforcement partners across the state to keep Florida safe. Thank you.
Before we take questions, I want to highlight what Attorney General told us just a minute ago. In one of our home invasions in Eagle Lake, they pointed a gun at an 8-year-old boy and threatened him. And then they pointed the gun to the head of an infant, 3 months old, and threatened him. This is the kind of people these folks are. And as a result, I want you to look around here today. This is the entire authority and power of the state of Florida that came down on them. And make no mistake about it. If you want to abuse the people of this state, it's not just your local police department or your local sheriff's office. It's not just your prosecutor's office, but it's the Attorney General and statewide prosecution and FDLE. We all work together, and that's why we have the free state of Florida. That's why it's safe and people feel safe in Florida, because we don't put up with this. And I can tell you this, we ran through them like Sherman through Georgia, and we're on our way to run through another group of them right now. In fact, we're going to have a press release later on of another case we worked with FDLE that will really shock you. That's a teaser for the future. Any questions for the Attorney General?
Oh, man, easy day. All right. Thank you, guys. Well, we got one?
I have a question unrelated, but I have questions for this.
Sure.
I have one unrelated to this.
All right.
You recently sent a letter to the city of Winter Haven regarding a possible violation of the state's public camping law. And they had come back to you and responded that one of the main tenets they think is that all those photos and all the evidence was provided during daylight hours. And people sleeping in public parks during daylight hours. Do you have a response to that?
Yeah, my response is we want to work with them to enforce the law. We passed a law recently here in Florida. Homelessness is not permitted. Law enforcement has a job to do. Part of having a safe environment for families is that you don't have people sleeping in parks where children might be playing, where you don't have people that may be inebriated or suffering from mental health issues or other dangerous violent tendencies. We don't want them near our kids. So the letter is, it's a stern but polite call for help, enforce the law. We're certainly willing to work together with them on it. I think the sheriff will work together with them. We're happy to help them get into a more compliant posture. But at the end of the day, if we put laws on the books here in Florida, they mean nothing if we don't enforce them. So we've seen some examples of jurisdictions that I don't think have done the best job in the state. I don't think this is a lone, isolated issue here in Central Florida. But we will engage in a dialogue and hopefully bring them into compliance.
I want to ask about Hernando Thompson. I'm looking at this screen here, and one of the first offenses you see is all the way back to 2003. A totally different time from right now. But the average person will look at that screen and say, why wasn't more done earlier to try and stop him? You see like the crazy charges there, and someone would say, there is no way that he could have been stopped beforehand to prevent any future crimes. So what would you say to the average person looking at that long rap sheet saying, where's the enforcement been for all these years, 23 years plus?
Sure. Well, look, I don't believe in early release. What I will say is when you got gang leaders like this, a lot of the more serious, heinous crimes, as the statewide prosecutor indicated, they try to insulate themselves where they're not directly boots on the ground, running headlong into police forces. Rather, they're managing it like a business leader. They're managing it like a business crime syndicate. So it takes a little bit longer to investigate and ultimately connect the dots to hold those people accountable for the crimes that others are committing under their direction, under their coordination. So we're changing the culture here even further. I mean, Florida's been a tough on crime. We're going to get even further tough on crime. And where prosecutors don't want to be tough on crime, we're going to send them packing for a new job. Yes.
Would you consider this to be the dismantling of sex, honey, and murder, their gang, or is there more work to do on this?
Well, we've dismantled a lot of it. I don't want to definitively say, they're dead in the water, but we're still working on some other leads and investigating, and where we see violent offenders rearing their heads, we're going to hold them accountable.
Do you expect additional charges from the initial people who were arrested in 2022?
I don't have definitive answers on that, but we're willing to follow up with you offline if more comes to light.
Sheriff, has this gentleman been at large since 2022, or now because of the wiretap situation, were they able to bring him into custody?
No, we arrested him in 2022. I don't know if he was in custody between then and his trial date or not, but he's certainly in custody now. We have the same questions that you have. People miss the opportunities to put really, really bad guys in prison along the way. And the bottom line to it is, you heard what the general said, we're over this in the state of Florida. And when you ask about dismantling, we dismantled this group. Now, will there be other people take their places? As long as there's money, as long as there's drugs, there's going to be somebody to take the risk. And when they take the risk, we're going to do the investigation and we're going to lock them up. So anytime you take away an organized crime group that's especially dealing with drugs, what you're doing is taking away another crime group's competition. And then we move on and investigate them, and we're going to be talking about some of that in the next day or two as well. But make no mistake about it. For those who continue to say that drugs are low level and nonviolent, if they speak those words, they are out of their mind. Because drugs are anything other than low level and nonviolent, because it leads to shooting. It leads to putting guns to 3 months old heads. It leads to robbery, and murder. So at the end of the day, this is just a remarkable piece of work. And there's more. Some of these people have already pled and they're already in prison. Others may still be waiting trial. So this is the organization that we successfully took down, and now you're seeing the trial. This guy here should spend the rest of his life breathing jail air.
Sheriff, in 2023, you all created the Violent Gang Task Force, Violent Gang Investigative Task Force.
Yes, ma'am.
Have you seen a reduction in gang activity in Polk County since the creation of that?
We absolutely have, because of our work with our city police agencies, our work with FDLE, our work with Brian Haas, who, by the way, is the best prosecutor any place on the face of the earth, and with our Attorney General and his staff. We have seen a significant reduction in gang activity. We've seen a significant reduction in home invasions, remarkably significantly. And in fact, we just celebrated in the unincorporated area and our service cities a 54-year low crime rate. So when we bring this to your attention, we want you to understand that we are focused and deadlocked on these folks that commit this kind of crime. And with the advent of our technology and our computers and our analysts, we are locked in and focused on the worst of the worst that are out here committing crimes. And if they're not in jail and prison now and facing the statewide prosecutor, or certainly the prosecutors of our state attorney, they will be.
Speaking of technology, social media plays a big role in recruitment efforts. What sort of initiatives do you have to combat that?
Yeah, first off, it's against the law to recruit for a gang online. So our intelligence team looks for any recruitment of gang members online. When we find that, we investigate it and we arrest them. It is against the law. And we really break the backs of the gangs every way that the law allows us to, because we know that the old way of tagging businesses, drive through Polk County. You don't see gang graffiti in Polk County. Do you know why? We don't allow it. And when it happens, we go there. Rob Mateo was one of our experts. We would see what the communication was. We would paint it out. We would follow it up. Now they've moved from tagging to online, and online we have arrested people for that. Because you can't recruit online, you can't have gang communications and recruit, you can't recruit in schools, and wherever we see it, we attack it.
Let me ask, on this profile, you have that you arrested Thompson in 2024. Is that an arrest from the jails, or was there a specific circumstance that you can share with us?
I don't.
There's a June 2024 arrest here on this profile of Hernando Thompson.
He was a fugitive at that time? Okay, he was a fugitive on the previous charges, which means they must have allowed him to post bail until he came up for his court date.
And that's a problem.
And that's a problem. Yeah, I don't know who the harebrained judge was that let him out when he's facing racketeering and he's the head of an organization and he's got a violent past. If anybody should have been detained in custody until trial, it should have been him. So, the bottom line is when he's not in jail, he's out committing crime to include a violent crime.
What do you think you learned in this massive effort that you could potentially apply to future efforts of gang members?
We learn every day when we deal with gangs. But what we learned is you can take down the entire infrastructure. And Rob, in addition to this, we actually took down like the head of the South Carolina gang, or what some of them.
One of the leaders of the
Come,
North
come
Carolina.
tell them who else we got
Yes, sir.
outside of the head of the Florida gang of sex, money, murder. We actually got some others.
Yes, sir. One of the leaders that we took was Mr. Jonathan Fleming. He was the #1 for the state of North Carolina at the time of this investigation. He brought a contingent down for an event that they were holding here. That was part of the overall investigation.
Can I say something to her point on the early release? It's got to stop. Judges have way too much discretion where somebody can be wanted for the most violent of crimes, and yet they're still allowed to walk free on bail. We had a case up in Tallahassee where an individual was actually convicted by a jury for child sex abuse, was released awaiting sentencing, and then he ultimately killed a 5-year-old girl, murdered this girl. So we've proposed legislation this year again titled Missy's Law, named after this young girl, to tie up these loopholes where judges are allowed to let these dangerous people go free. Somebody that's a child sex abuse defendant doesn't have the ability to just walk around our little kids. We can't have that. So we're trying to tighten up there. Thanks for the question. Anybody else?
What do you think?
All right.
All right. Keep in mind, when we put these people in jail, we're stopping them from carjacking your friends and your relatives. We're stopping them from doing home invasions to your friends and your relatives. This is about protecting the people of the state of Florida. And it is an honor, General, to have you as our Attorney General who recognizes there's nothing more important than the safety and security of the people of the state of Florida. And we're going to keep locking bad guys up. But hey, if you really want to commit crime unabated, there's California, New York, New Jersey, Minnesota, pick a state, all right? Go there. Just get out of Florida.